What happens when a traveling salesman and a professor walk into a bar in Tijuana, Mexico? Well, you get an intellectual conversation that begins with whether this bar is the longest bar in the world, followed by a series of lectures by Dr. Pettywell on the history of Paleolithic education. So, why should you read this book? Well, first, the satire in the book can be humorous and entertaining. Secondly, and more importantly, there are many valuable lessons that can be learned from Dr. Pettywell's lectures. Each chapter gives a short story about the development of education and teaches us lessons through satirical stories. In these stories, the solutions to the problems that arise seem so obvious, and so the satire lies in how absurd the thought process of people can be. Many of the ideas discussed in this book have direct parallels to our current educational system. In the first lecture, a man named New Fist saw that children were bored and asked himself, what could he teach the children to help them have a better life? This relates to designing curriculum because Wiggins and McTighe also say that curriculum should begin with identifying desired results or goals. Page 18. With this goal in mind, Newfist created the first curriculum. The three things that Newfist focused on were teaching kids how to grab fish, club horses, and scare tigers with fire. This curriculum effectively helped the tribes for years, but eventually new challenges arose. The new challenges were a melting glacier made the water murky, which made it difficult to catch fish. The horses migrated and were replaced by antelopes, which were much too alert to effectively club. The tigers developed pneumonia and died off, and they were replaced by bears, which were not afraid of fire. The new challenges that the Paleolithic tribes experienced are kind of like the new challenges that we constantly face today. If we want students to be able to overcome these challenges, then we need to reinforce relevant skills and understanding of topics so that they can transfer what they learn. Now, one day, some tribesmen decided to innovate outside of their classical education of the New Fist curriculum, and they developed new skills that helped address these problems, such as making nets for fishing, making snares for antelopes, and digging pits for the bears. Some tribesmen came up with ways to address these new challenges, but some resisted the needed change to the curriculum. They said that changing the curriculum would be a training exercise and not education because the essence of true education is timelessness. And that's on page 43 of Pettywell. They also said that teaching these new skills would overcrowd the current curriculum. This may sound familiar. Some teachers may be too busy focusing on the classical skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic to introduce new ideas that can develop understanding of concepts beyond these basic skills. Some may even say that they do not have time or their curriculum is too crowded to teach beyond these sets of facts. However, um, however, good design then is not so much about gaining few new technical skills as it is about learning. Um, it says Wiggins and McTighe on page 14. This is like when educators refuse to make curriculum current and relevant to students. education became academically respectful, but it lacked transferability in understanding or usefulness. In response, one group of observers concluded that the chief mistake in the current educational methods came simply from the circumstance of having too much direction of learning. Let the child grow naturally into his learning activities, they said, and that's on page 58 of Pettywell. And so the chief said that teachers should act as a guide instead. They thought that this was great because the students are learning what they live and living what they learn. This is kind of like when teachers learn about the latest and greatest tools, teaching strategies, or teaching advice that will solve all their problems. Now, I'm not saying that hands on experiences are not helpful. In fact, Pettywell does seem to support some of the benefits of hands on activities in his book. However, using backwards design and without using backwards design and without starting with clear goals, then learning becomes aimless and directionless. The era of activity oriented design might be called hands on without being minds on, engaging experiences that only lead accidentally, if at all, to insight or achievement. And that's stated by Wiggins and McTighe on page 16. Really, all this is to say that you can study the complexity and intricacies of education. You can even make education scientific and academically respectful. Some new adaptations in education may even be good, but if you fail to set specific goals that are relevant and useful, then you will fail to prepare the students for their future, which can have dire consequences. The ironic part is that when a tribesman challenged the system and asked why they were not using common sense, others threatened to duck him in the creek for preaching an unpaleolithicism on page 107. A teacher who had been standing in the crowd and observing this exciting event asked his fellow teachers about it the next morning. In education, shouldn't we do something definite? Have something clearly in mind? Have a particular goal which will modify the behavior of our people so that they can arrange some system of hunting and fishing that will keep them better from starvation? We can teach them how to think, not what to think, chanted his fellow teachers in unison. So basically, people knew what the solution should be. For example, creating clear goals that will modify the behavior of people to be more productive in their society. But others resisted change because they thought their traditional education system was correct. This inconsistency can be seen in the modern education system. So, at the end of the book, a neighboring tribe was seeking to go to war. Their scout reported back to the leader, Bigness, on the education system he saw. No, d- don't they don't they have an education to give them a notion? No, Bigness, not in the sense of an activity planned to put the tribe nearer to any clear-cut goal. They do have something they call education, but it is just a collection of traditional activities, a machine which they worship for its own sake. This scout is basically saying The effectiveness of their designs corresponds to whether they have accomplished ex- explicit goals for specific end users. And this is what Wiggins and McTighe say. So ultimately, this all says that it shows us how important education is and how important it is to set goals. So, if you want to learn more about the importance of creating goals, and if you want to avoid making the many mistakes that the tribesmen made in this book, then you need to read this book. Thank you.